This video is brought to you by strawberry.me. Hey everyone, most of you are aware of a few instances in which I was asked to appear on Piers Morgan's show, but it didn't pan out for one reason or another. Well, guess what? It finally happened. What was the topic and how did it go, you ask? Let me tell you all about it. So the first time a Piers Morgan producer reached out to me was in July of last year. My first Terrence Howard video had gone fairly viral, and Piers wanted to have RFK Weinstein on, along with the Tweedledee to his Tweedledum, Brian Keating, and some other guy, to talk about the impact of nut jobs like Terry on the general public. At the last minute I was dropped from the segment, likely because Eric demanded it, though I can't be sure. So I did my own piece to cover what I would have said, wrapping up with an essay on anti-intellectualism that I'm rather proud of, which I also published separately. Then in January of this year, I was asked once again to join a panel, this time regarding trans issues, to occur right after Piers talking one-on-one with Jerry Coyne regarding the whole Freedom from Religion Foundation fiasco. This time I had to decline because I had a prior commitment at precisely the same time they were slated to record, ironically with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, so that one was actually my fault, but once again I released a video outlining what I would have said. Then they reached out a third time in August because I had released my huge RFK video a month prior, and Piers wanted to host a debate to discuss Maha and all the insanity that's been going on at HHS since RFK took office. To give you some context, Piers producers typically give next to no notice when requesting appearances. They are always emailing or texting about a segment that is taping in a few hours, or half a day at the most. But since all of the information from my video was still pretty fresh in my mind, I agreed to do it. So who else was going to participate? Well, their idea was to have me debate Bret Weinstein. Just me, Piers, and Bret hashing it out. They asked if I was willing, and I said, abso-fucking-lutely, I will crush that clown. But wouldn't you know it, Bret declined. Why do you suppose that might be? Oh right, it's because I've ruined him in several videos almost as badly as his big brother Eric, since he's a disgusting, grifting fraud who tells lies that get people killed, and he knew that I would smack him around like it was the goddamn WWF. So instead, the producers told me that Bret would debate another Bret, Bret Girard, a physician and former Assistant Secretary for Health. Then after that, Piers would talk to me one-on-one until the end of the segment. While I was disappointed to miss out on some carnage, I was still happy to be given the platform, and Piers was actually quite reasonable in his line of questioning, apart from always asking 3 questions at once. But I will say that he was surprisingly accepting of reality on this topic. Because of this, I was able to stay on top of things and say most of what I wanted to say totally unimpeded. Now, I'm not going to show you my part of the segment in full because that would be a bit redundant, and while I do repost discussions from smaller channels, I'm not familiar with the legality of reposting videos from bigger channels like Piers, so please head over to his channel and check it out if you're curious. Who knows, if this video gets a lot of views, maybe I'll post my section separately anyway and just accept the takedown request if it happens, since it wouldn't require any effort on my end. But you'd better believe I can also do a piece saying everything I would have said right to Bret's dumb lying face, so that's what this video is gonna be. After all, I've done it before for his douchebag brother, and it yielded some high quality content, and I've really been on a kick humiliating the Weinstein boys lately, so why not keep it going? Let's get started right after a quick word from today's sponsor. As an entrepreneur running a business by myself, things can get pretty overwhelming. Sometimes you just need someone there to help bring clarity to your vision and take the right steps towards success. That's why I've been using strawberry.me. Strawberry is a service that pairs you with a coach for virtual career coaching sessions based on your specific needs and around your schedule. If you go to strawberry.me/Professor Dave, you can claim a $50 credit to try your first session right away. It couldn't be easier. First, you fill out a brief questionnaire that assesses where you're getting stuck, and then you're ready for your first session. Identify your goals and blind spots. Build your career plan. Have someone there to keep you accountable for the goals you set. Your coach isn't a mentor telling you what to do, and they aren't a therapist analyzing who you are. They're something in between. They're just someone that can help you figure out how to maximize your business potential and offer advice along the way. My coach Ashley helped me navigate the pressures of maintaining enough income to support my family while holding on to the integrity that built my channel. Now I'm more energized, less overwhelmed, and I can see my goals with more clarity. This visual approach thing, mapping goals on a whiteboard, has really cut through the fog for me. What about you? You can talk about how to scale up your business, get that promotion, whatever is most urgent for you. So don't waste any more time stuck in dead ends. If you're serious about success, scan this QR code or go to strawberry.me/Professor Dave and claim your free $50 credit to get matched with a certified career coach today. That's strawberry.me/Professor Dave to get your career on the right track.
After softening his position in Senate hearings, RFK announced last week that he's cutting $500 million in funding for mRNA vaccine research. That was, of course, the technology behind the COVID vaccine. Well, President Trump is unsure.
You were the driving force behind Operation Warp Speed, these mRNA vaccines that are the gold standard. Now your health secretary is pulling back all the funding for research. He's saying that the risks outweigh the benefits, which puts him at odds with the entire medical community and with you. What is going on?
Research on what?
Into mRNA vaccines.
Well, we're going to look at that. We're talking about it, and they're doing a very good job. And, you know, that is a pass. With Operation Warp Speed, was, whether you're Republican or Democrat, considered one of the most incredible things ever done in this country.
It's a great clip to start with since it highlights the supreme hypocrisy of the Trump administration. The development of the COVID vaccines was an astounding achievement, and it happened coincidentally under Trump's watch, so he wants to take all the credit for it. But he also wants to spread science denial and put piece of shit anti-vaxxers like RFK in positions of power. When this contradiction is pointed out right to his face, he just waffles and pats himself on the back without actually answering the question. And for context, part of what's being discussed here is RFK recently pulling $500 million in funding for further mRNA vaccine research, which would have gone towards developing vaccines for the flu, RSV, HIV, Zika, cancer, autoimmune stuff, and more. That would have saved a lot of lives, but RFK doesn't like it, and Trump doesn't seem to care, nor does he even seem to have been aware of what the reporter was talking about.
So 6 months into the tenure of the most controversial health secretary in modern US history, we're debating whether RFK is making America healthy again, or perhaps the opposite. To debate this, I'm joined by Bret Weinstein, a professor of evolutionary biology and host of the Dark Horse podcast, and by Bret Jr, who's the physician scientist and former assistant secretary for health in the first Trump administration. Well, welcome to both of you. Bret Weinstein, are you pleased or disappointed with what RFK has done so far?
I would say I am pleased and disappointed, but not with Secretary Kennedy. I understand that he is facing a labyrinth that those of us on the outside do not understand. And I know him personally. I know he's moving as fast as he feels that he can in the direction that he feels he must take us. It is frustrating on the outside to watch how slowly this is moving, but he's clearly making moves in the right direction.
Yeah, so many moves in the right direction. It just isn't fast enough. That's literally the only problem. He's too slow. Firing thousands of experts from CDC and FDA and replacing them with a cartoonish roster of incompetent frauds is awesome, but he needs to go faster. Slashing $500 million in funding for life-saving research is awesome, but he needs to go faster. Pumping out Maha reports full of AI slop and lies is awesome, but he needs to go faster. Spreading lies about vaccines which generate huge waves of vaccine hesitancy that get children killed is awesome, but he needs to go faster. Bret's putting his cards on the table right from the get-go, and his rhetoric is not surprising in the slightest.
I've had a very, very top experienced oncologist in the UK, in London, one of the best in the country, who's expressed exactly the same concerns to me for a long period of time about the mRNA vaccine. So they weren't all mRNA, but the ones that were, he's been very concerned about that. What do you feel about that particular issue?
Unfortunately, the mRNA platform, though it is brilliant in its conception, is fatally flawed. And although there are arguably applications where it might be useful, something like the treatment of a deadly cancer, it is not appropriate to vaccinate against a relatively mundane disease like COVID. The reason that it isn't is that the platform itself carries hazards at its core that at the moment we have no technological fix for. So the myocarditis and pericarditis that showed up as a result of COVID vaccinations are inherent to the platform, not to the messenger RNA that was delivered inside these shots. It would, in my opinion, be almost certain to show up irrespective of what foreign protein was encoded by the vaccine in question. And it would be no service to the public if we were to allow vaccines that have this flaw to be deployed only to discover years later that people had been injured and died because of them.
This is what a convincing charlatan sounds like. It's all bullshit out of his mouth, but I'll be damned if he doesn't make it sound reasonable, huh? All that myocarditis, you guys. All that practically negligible amount of myocarditis that was extremely mild and resolved itself without medical intervention, especially when compared with the 3 to 4 times greater risk of far more severe myocarditis from COVID infection. Such a huge concern, am I right? No, there is nothing inherent to the platform, and he's trying to differentiate between the platform and the mRNA inside the vaccines. The mRNA is the platform, genius. They're mRNA vaccines. What else would be the platform? And this claim that these side effects would result regardless of the protein being encoded by the mRNA is also idiotic. The very rare and mild instances of myocarditis occurred because lingering spike protein caused slight inflammation in endothelial cells of the heart because it binds to ACE2 receptors, since the spike protein is very similar to proteins like alpha-myosin that are found on the surface of cardiac cells. To claim that literally any protein would have the same effect is to claim that all proteins are the same and interact with receptors in exactly the same way, which is the same as announcing that you're a fucking idiot with no idea how receptors work.
In simple layman's terms, is the issue with mRNA that in an effort to provide immunity against COVID-19, it damages and reduces your general immunity in many people?
No, I would say it's actually much worse than that. That's true.
No, that's absolutely not true. That's indefensible gibberish. How the hell would a vaccine damage your general immunity? Vaccines prompt the immune system to identify and eradicate a specific pathogen. But this dumb lie that Piers fell for isn't malicious or conspiratorial enough for Bret, so let's see what he's got cooking.
The problem is that the design of this platform is to induce your own cells to make a foreign protein which gets displayed on the surface of those cells. That's as intended. But because there's no targeting mechanism to lead it to happen only in certain tissues, it can happen haphazardly around the body, including in places like your heart. And what that triggers is your own immune system to see those foreign proteins and conclude the only thing they can, which is that those cells have been virally infected. And the right response, the natural response of the body, is to take virally infected cells and destroy them. So the idea that we get myocarditis from the COVID shots is really standing in for a much starker reality, which is that inflammation, myocarditis, is the symptom of damage to the heart done by our own immune systems in response to the cells in the heart producing a foreign protein and triggering our immune system to attack them.
Bret is explaining how mRNA vaccines work and then gawking at the mechanism like it's a horror movie. Yeah, dumbass, you inject mRNA and your cells make the viral protein so that you don't have to get injected with any viral particle. It's fucking brilliant. Your cells make proteins all the time, so making one more isn't that weird. And mRNA degrades rapidly, so it's not like it goes on forever. It makes some spike protein, which gets presented to immune cells, and then antibodies are produced that will recognize that spike protein and tag it for destruction by macrophages. You're just explaining how mRNA vaccines work, citing rare instances in which the spike protein lingers and causes very mild adverse effects, and pretending it's all a big disaster. This is what you're whining about that's supposed to outweigh millions of lives being saved?
Okay, Bret Jr, thank you for your patience on this. What is your response? First of all, the same question to you. Do you think that RFK Jr. is so far doing a good job, or are you concerned about the job he's doing?
I have to agree with my debate partner here is that I'm both pleased and somewhat disappointed. I think he's done a spectacular job in highlighting some of the underlying fundamental health issues of Americans and many people in higher income countries, and that is poor nutrition, poor physical fitness.
Okay, in general, the other Bret does a decent job in this segment, so I'm not going to focus on him too much. But it's unfortunate that some figures decide to give RFK this type of charity. Yes, RFK often points out that some people eat too much junk food and don't exercise, so they get fat. This is neither a stunning revelation nor an actionable point for policy. He's not going to ban fast food or implement fitness mandates, and Republicans would be the first ones to lose their minds about federal overreach if he did. It's just empty rhetoric to make it seem like he gives half a shit about public health. He doesn't.
In his overall tenor and approach to vaccination and his lack of I would say, enthusiastic support early on for things like measles vaccination when there's an outbreak.
Yes, he's a disgusting monster whose lies cause children to die of measles. We will be on the same page on a lot of this stuff, even if our wording is a bit different, so we can pivot back to the crappy Bret.
And that maybe the lessons we learned from the COVID pandemic will be extremely useful in dealing with the next thing that comes. And his prediction was that we were, and I'll come to you here, Bret Weinstein, it's highly likely that we're going to have to deal with another pandemic of some sort, and it could be a lot more serious next time. But the lessons we learned with this actually could be very beneficial. Would you agree with that?
No. I think the chances that we will deal with another pandemic are actually, unfortunately, tightly correlated with our cryptic bioweapons research, disguised in the U.S. as dual-use research.
Ah, yes. Any pandemic that could possibly happen in the future will necessarily be a bioweapon because Bret says so. Natural pandemics don't and can't happen, you guys. If another pandemic occurs, there's no need to actually investigate anything or gather evidence of any kind. It is factually a bioweapon, so pre-order my shitty book about it today. Jesus Christ, what a hack.
The 1918 flu pandemic would not happen again today for two different reasons. One, many of the people who died were actually victims of a bacterial pneumonia that we can now treat with antibiotics. And two, aspirin was, at the time, a new wonder drug, and the dosages that were given to people who contracted the flu are doses that are now understood to be fatal.
Yeah, the 50 million people who died during the 1918 influenza pandemic actually died from aspirin, you guys. Not a virus, heavens no. Total bullshit. Death rates were just as high in areas where aspirin was not available, doses actually administered are not well documented, and there is no evidence from autopsies to support such a claim. A few deaths? Sure. Primary cause? Bullshit. And while secondary bacterial infections did occur, that we now have a wide variety of antibiotics doesn't address the issue of the virus itself, and the 1918 flu was particularly lethal. Bret is downplaying the risk of a pandemic immediately after a recent deadly pandemic. Insanity.
Yes, in one sense, the mRNA platform solves a question, a pharmacological question, in that it can be deployed very rapidly. On the other hand, it carries a defect in its heart even beyond the tendency to trigger the immune system to attack your own tissues, and that is that the very nature of the platform requires the presentation of a very narrow antigenic set, which means that the viruses that we are confronting have a relatively easy problem to solve evolutionarily. Unlike natural immunity, where you become immune to an entire virus, your immunity to a single antigen is something that evolution can easily sidestep. So what we tend to do with a narrowly targeted platform like mRNA is drive the evolution of the virus, which may even prolong a pandemic.
It's all pros and cons, Bretty boy. One antigen versus all the viral antigens means a more directed immune response. And remember how you whine about the side effects of the spike protein? More non-essential viral proteins means more side effects. Funny how you gloss over that, huh? Also, plenty of vaccines inject a singular viral protein, so mRNA vaccines are not new in that regard. It's just the transcript for the single viral protein instead of the viral protein itself. And don't forget the sidestepping of all the risk associated with injecting an attenuated virus. There are tragic instances in the past where a virus is not properly attenuated and a vaccine just gives the patient the live virus. This happened in 1955 with the polio vaccine. A tainted batch went out and 120,000 children were injected with live polio virus, 56 of which ended up paralyzed and 5 dead. I know it's 70 years later and we're much smarter about this sort of stuff, but don't you think it's a neat innovation to not have to inject a viral component of any kind? And finally, yes, it's possible for the virus to mutate so as to produce a new spike protein that antibodies generated from previous vaccines are no longer effective against. You know what works really well in preventing that? Everyone getting the initial vaccine so that there is no host pool within which the virus has time to mutate and generate new strains. So if you were really so concerned about that, you wouldn't be talking shit about vaccines and persuading people not to get them. Whoops. Speaking of persuading people not to get vaccines, let's pivot to RFK directly fueling hesitancy towards the MMR vaccine, which resulted in measles deaths.
Yeah, I mean, Bret Weinstein is an interesting test case, I felt, for RFK Jr., because his initial reaction was not to promote the vaccine, certainly publicly. Then he about-faced when some children died, and I assume he was fearful of this getting out of control. And at that point, he did advocate for the vaccine. What did you make of that journey he went on?
Well, again, I think he's in an impossible position.
No, he's not in an impossible position. He's in an incredibly easy position. Tell everyone to get the fucking MMR vaccine, the one that has a decades-long proven track record of being supremely safe and effective, to the point where measles had been declared eradicated until idiots suddenly stopped getting it due to anti-vax rhetoric from asshats like you and RFK. What's so impossible here, numbnuts?
He has an encyclopedic knowledge of vaccine technology, both its benefits and its hazards.
Yeah, and Trump has an encyclopedic knowledge of quantum mechanics. Holy shit, how can you say something like that with a straight face?
I have become aware that we have several vaccine platforms, none of which are especially safe. Each has its own defects, and therefore the correct position should be one of great caution. When do we have a disease that is sufficiently serious and a vaccine that is sufficiently safe that the cost-benefit analysis argues in favor of it?
When you have a disease that kills people and a vaccine that's been proven conclusively to be incredibly safe and effective against that disease, like measles and the MMR vaccine. Why is it so fucking hard for you to say that, Bret? Hanging on to the autism thing for street cred?
It is true that measles is dangerous in a modern context, but what Secretary Kennedy is highlighting is that a lot of that has to do with the vulnerability of the population. The ill health of the population renders it vulnerable and may force us into using a vaccine in order to limit the harms. But that comes at a massive cost. And long term, the right answer is to fix the health of the population so that diseases like measles are again rendered controllable by other means.
By what other means, dumbass? You think if everyone does a keto diet and a few push-ups, they magically can't get measles? Vaccines are the means, asshole. Vaccines artificially prompt the body to produce antibodies in response to a particular antigen without having to get infected by that virus, so that if the body comes into contact with the virus, it can destroy the virus immediately without getting severely infected. It's the most incredible thing people have made in human history. and your response is, nah, let's do something else, without even attempting to explain what the fuck your alternative is. And sorry, what is this massive cost you're alluding to? Can't specify, huh? What is the massive cost of the MMR vaccine being included in the vaccine schedule for children? Being a little achy for a day at the site of injection? Holy shit, what a cost. Let's just let the little fuckers die, huh?
I just think that's a naive view. It's a really naive view. You're not going to create populations that are healthy enough that they will not catch measles when they're young children. You're not going to create a population that's healthy enough that Ebola is not a fatal disease.
Thanks, smart Bret. Dumb Bret, any thoughts?
It seems to me that you are confusing the issue of how contagious measles is with how dangerous it is. And I agree, you're not going to prevent people from catching measles simply by having them in excellent health.
Really? Because that's basically what you just said literally 1 minute ago.
The question is what happens to them after they catch measles. And your point about the number of kids who would die of measles, I think we have to reevaluate in light of the poor health of our children. But even if the number was 200 a year in the US, let's say, you have to compare that with the harm done by the vaccines in other regards. For example, the production of allergies. How many kids die of asthma that is the result of an allergy that is triggered by an adjuvant in a vaccine? And let us just say,
I disagree with that set of facts because I absolutely disagree that the long-term effects of something like a measles vaccine, this has been well studied, trying to make a link between an adjuvant and a vaccine and long-term asthma is just not there.
Smart Bret is doing some of my work for me here. Yes, dumb Bret, the harm done by the MMR vaccine is virtually non-existent, and precisely 0 kids get asthma due to an adjuvant in the MMR vaccine. 0. Do you know how I know that? Because the MMR vaccine does not contain any adjuvants. It contains live weakened viruses, so no adjuvants are necessary. Whoops. And you can pretend you were talking about vaccines in general, but there's no evidence supporting the claim no matter what vaccine you point to, and no matter how much you whine about aluminum or any other substance.
The problem is that when one digs into the literature on the safety of these things, one does not find the properly controlled studies that would give you an idea of how many people we lose as a result of the vaccines as compared to how many people we lose as a result of the disease.
Yes, the old they don't study it enough routine. It totally makes sense, unless you look up the abundance of safety studies that have been done all over the world for decades that completely rule out all the bullshit you're spewing.
But, in England, if you buy a loaf of bread from a supermarket, within about 7 days, it starts to mold. Clearly, you can see it molding. In America, you can have the same loaf of bread or type of bread, and a month after you open it, it's still absolutely fine. That's not normal, and that's not healthy.
Where the fuck are you buying your bread in America, Piers? You're either lying, or you got confused by some plastic toy bread for toddlers.
Yeah, and Bret Weinstein, he is RFK, a fine figure of a fit man for, what is he, 70 now? He looks great. He obviously practices by example.
He's on dangerous amounts of testosterone, meaning steroids. He got a brain worm from undercooked meat. He bathes in raw sewage, and his weird red leathery face tells nothing but lies. So no, Piers, he's not really living up to the Kennedy Viga his dad and uncle represented. Sorry.
But I just think on this stuff, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? Are you completely behind him?
I'm not a huge fan of the term no-brainer, but this is well beyond that. So my training is as an evolutionary biologist, and I think it is fair to say that the farther we are from the environment for which we are adapted, the more unhealthy we're going to be. And you can just look at the issue you point to with respect to bread rotting on the shelves. We've solved a supply chain problem at the expense of our health, and reversing it would no doubt improve health substantially.
We've been over this, Bret. You're not an evolutionary biologist. You're a podcaster and charlatan. But sorry, we're getting too far from the environment for which we are adapted. Do you live in a cave or a hut made of sticks? Or do you live in a big house with countless modern amenities that you bought with money you made from lying on the internet? And what the fuck does that have to do with Piers' imaginary bread that never molds?
I would also say that same logic applies across the board, that really, in one sense, the processed food question isn't different than the vaccine question. What we have, it is not part of your natural environment to have aluminum injected into your muscles. And what is the consequence for your health? It's negative. What does the science say? Well, mostly the science wasn't done. So we are left with an absence of evidence, which is not evidence of absence for the harms done by this.
Putting aluminum in our bodies is so unnatural, you guys. The human body should never have any aluminum in it at all. Are you insane? Except, of course, for the fact that our bodies do have aluminum in them, and the amount of aluminum contained in select vaccines is so incredibly negligible that it does not appreciably raise the amount of aluminum in the body. For children, the amount of aluminum that slowly leaks from muscle tissue into the bloodstream due to vaccines is roughly the same as the amount of aluminum that enters the bloodstream due to breastfeeding over the same time period. So no, Bret, it is specifically equivalent to the most natural thing imaginable, breastfeeding. Pretending that the safety of aluminum-based adjuvants has never been demonstrated also makes you a lying piece of shit, since that has been done countless times. Aluminum-based adjuvants currently implemented in vaccines are safe. I went over a mountain of data demonstrating this in extreme detail in my giant debunk of RFK, so head over there for a more rigorous analysis.
I would say, in general, being healthy is a matter of restoring a natural environment to the extent we are capable of doing it, and I'm all for it in any realm where we are pushing in that direction.
Natural environment only, you guys. We need to get back to nature. Remember when we had a child mortality rate of 50%? That was awesome. And dying from pathogens by the millions while having no fucking clue what was happening to us was awesome too. We need to get back to that. Any kind of technology that raises the human life expectancy or quality of life in any way is the devil, and we need to stop using it. Nature is always good and has never harmed us in any way, and the stuff humans make is always bad and has never helped us in any way. Airtight logic, dipshit.
We know how to study the question. If I'm wrong and injecting aluminum into your muscle is not dangerous, that's a scientifically easy thing to establish, and the fact that we haven't done the work properly is conspicuous.
No, what's conspicuous is that we have indeed done the work, confirmed that it is perfectly safe, and yet you keep pretending that we haven't and that it's not. That's called you being a lying piece of shit fraud.
For the public who doesn't know what an adjuvant is an additive that is put into a vaccine that causes your immune system to become alarmed so that it reacts to the antigen that has been injected with it. Now, that works fine on paper, but the problem is the aluminum adjuvant is not specific to the antigen in any way. Your immune system knows that it's on high alert, but it doesn't know what it's alert to. And so, is this connected to all of the proliferating allergies that we see in younger people today? Is this causing people to have asthma, a disease that is very serious and from which many die?
Man, Bret is great at explaining how a miraculous thing works relatively accurately and somehow making it sound nefarious at the same time. Yes, adjuvants activate the innate immune response to create a local immunocompetent environment at the injection site, forming a depot to sustain antigen release for more effective antigen presentation to T and B cells. In other words, they make the vaccine work better. Bret is basically saying, these things make the vaccine work better. Isn't that horrible? No, Bret, there is no basis to presume that enhancing the immune response at the site of injection is giving people asthma. Stop fear-mongering and learn how science works.
Well, listening to my previous two guests, and here to give his verdict on whether RFK is making America healthy again, is Dave Farina, the host of Professor Dave Explains. Well, Dave, welcome to Uncensored.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, it's time for my bit, and like I said at the beginning of the piece, I'll just leave it to you to check it out on the original video if you're interested. Not to toot my own horn too much, but I definitely delivered. I crapped on Bret a little, I crapped on RFK a whole lot, and hopefully knocked some sense into a few viewers who had the courage to listen to what I had to say. If you watched my RFK video, you've already heard most of it, though I had a few additional points that were relevant to this specific discussion, so check the description for a link to the original video and skip to around 39 minutes if you'd like to have a listen. As for Bret, you've heard me diagnose him before, but he really is a particularly vile brand of scumbag. He's vile specifically because he's mastered a manipulative tone and demeanor that makes him seem measured and reasonable, when in fact he's just telling outright lies. These are lies that promote vaccine hesitancy, which causes deaths. And he platforms others who also tell outright lies, people like Pierre Corey, who pushed the ivermectin scam that got thousands of people killed. Given the live debate I was recently a part of, you can expect to see a bunch of content very soon dunking on Pierre and his idiot crony Steve Kirsch, since these assholes are just like Bret. They all spin sophisticated webs of lies for self-enrichment that directly lead to human deaths. You've all seen me shift heavily towards exposing these types of figures, and it's been a long time coming, since they are some of the frauds who most urgently need to be debunked, given their profound influence and the increasingly science-illiterate and conspiratorial public that they are deliberately sculpting. They really are monsters, and I will do everything I can to help their victims see what they really are, no matter how much hate and harassment it brings. So that's it for Bret Weinstein and his anti-vax bullshit on Piers Morgan. What kind of shenanigans will he and his brother enact next, such that another smackdown will be in order? We'll just have to wait and see. Until next time.